Delighted to say I'm joined by Eddie Brennan, who's an instructor in the Garda College and also a sergeant out there on the front line in the battle at the moment with COVID-19. Eddie, can I just ask you, just what's it like out there for people in the Garda forces at the moment?
Sure. It's just, I suppose, really all hands to the pump. To be honest, Shane, at the moment, it's I suppose it's a mad situation. Maybe what's happened the last couple of weeks, but unfortunately, the show has to go on, and there's work that needs to be done. So I suppose all available resources are deployed to frontline duties. So that's where it's at, and on a daily basis, you're just you're interacting with people, and unfortunately, look, the vast majority of people are, complying with what the HSE and government are looking for. But unfortunately, look, there's the small pods, and look, there's probably an element of boredom in it too for people that were so used to being out and about socially. But obviously enough, look, there's aspects of that have to be dealt with, and you just want people to adhere to what the government and the HSE are looking for people to do.
Yeah, because and that's it. Like people being idle is obviously going to lead to just acting silly at times, and then of course there's some premeditated stuff. Or even people spitting on guards. We've seen people arrested for that. People coughing at Simon Harris. Really disgusting sort of behaviour. Like, is it very tough for you as a guard to go out on the street knowing that you can come up against this, never mind the seriousness of COVID-19, if that wasn't happening?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, that's a very I suppose it's the reality for Gardai and even people in the frontline services. You take your first responders, your ambulance crews, your nurses, doctors, all people that are at the coalface of that. Unfortunately, there's a very small element of society that will engage in that kind of behaviour, and I suppose you just have to deal with that. That's the sad nature of it. But unfortunately, the situation is where it is right now, and it's all because of COVID-19. So I think all you're trying to do really is just is get people to steer people in the right direction, and help out, because it's a very unusual situation. I suppose we find ourselves in. It's a global epidemic. It's a global emergency, and all you're looking for really for people to do is to help themselves, because I think the more that's done right now, uh, it's going to help us down the line. So more than ever, I suppose you're out there and you're trying to, I suppose, help people. Really, that's the role. I mean, there's a lot of stuff online as well about people in vulnerable situations, some of the elderly and that, and that's really the priority at the moment, is to ensure that all members of society are catered for. And I think the GA are definitely to the forefront with that. But yeah, look, unfortunately, there's just a nasty element sometimes, and sometimes, look, people are, I suppose, quite silly with that. But unfortunately, that's just the nature of the beast sometimes.
The advice from the government, the HSE, has been to people in general: come together by staying apart, stay at home, don't go out in groups and all that. Whereas for you and for other guards, you're going out to the coalface. It's kind of like in war times, people walking towards the guns and walking towards the tanks and that kind of stuff. Is it very tough on a personal level to know that the general advice is to stay out, stay in, whereas you have to go out?
Yeah, it's a difficult scenario to find yourself in, but like I said, there's a lot of people, across, from the Gardaí to the nurses to doctors, all those, I suppose, areas of the professions, and that's what they're faced with. But there's a lot of people staying in. I think if you go around any, even the odd time you have to get into the car to go and get some groceries or whatever it is, it's just it's so quiet around the place. It's unusual. So in some ways, it's maybe a throwback to you hear these stories of going back to world wars and stuff like that, how people had to all stay indoors and things like that. But it's obviously serious on a different level. So yeah, it can be tricky, but like anything too, you just have to do your best with it. And again, you're mindful of your own, I suppose, personal health as well, as much as that. So I suppose that's really what's driving it at the moment, is you're trying to talk to people and interact with people and help people, because unfortunately real life goes on for a lot of people, and sometimes there's little bits and pieces that happen, and they require some of the emergency service to help them out. So it's an occupational hazard, but look, that's such is life, and you just have to, I suppose, do your best to make sure that you're doing the social distancing and the cleaning the hands as much as you possibly can.
And are there situations, I mean, anecdotally I hear about it, situations where people are told to isolate, self-isolate, that people are showing symptoms, and just out of sheer boredom or devilment or whatever it is, they're still going out anyway and potentially infecting other people?
Yeah, probably a lot of people maybe are just maybe a fraction casual with it at times. I think maybe they don't realize the seriousness of it. And what I'm kind of saying to people as well at the moment is, we're only in the start of this. So for me, in terms of applying maybe the sports side to it, we're only in the first 10 minutes of the match really at the moment. And I think it's now more than ever maybe that people need to maybe tune into that and really concentrate, because I think sometimes the novelty effect of what's happening, and I don't use that word like, I suppose, mean to use that word lightly, novelty, but I suppose it's something that's going on for the last couple of weeks. And unfortunately, when the weather gets good like this, people just want to go out, and that makes it all the more difficult, and maybe I suppose adds to it in some ways. And you're just hoping that people will do the right thing. But yeah, it's a tricky one, because I think if it was the winter, it might be a fraction easier to keep people indoors. But unfortunately, I think especially anyone with young kids, they find that very, very difficult. They see the sunshine, they want to go to the parks, they want to go out and socialise, and it's just an absolute no-no now, and it's a very difficult situation, I think, that everyone finds themselves in.
From your own point of view, do you do you have discussions about preparing for the best case scenario of what happens here, the worst case scenario? Because obviously the best case scenario is still going to lead to an awful lot of an awful lot of desperate times for certain families, and the worst case scenario is just, it's hard to even think about how bad that's going to be. But do you have discussions to brace yourselves for what you're about to walk into in the next number of weeks and months, or just mentally the toll it's going to take?
Yeah, well, I suppose that's the reality. Everything now is based around COVID-19, and first and foremost, you have to protect yourself to a degree. There's a personal responsibility there in relation to the social distancing, and it's something that we have to practice as much as anyone else. You're saying, look, you're going to deal with calls and stuff like that, but you have to do the basics, and that's, you're using the sterilizer, you're cleaning your hands, you're applying social distancing. If members are out and about on the beach, they have to spread out. So like there's that aspect of it, and then by the very nature of it, sometimes depending on the nature of the call, it just means that the gravity of certain situations means people have to rush in. But definitely, look, there's an element of planning has to go into that. There's a little bit more thought has to go into that. You just have to be very, very aware of what's happening around you. And generally, look, we'll try to deal with people in, I suppose, through discussions, and generally the vast majority of people are very good, and look, long may that continue.
Yeah, because I was just reading up an article earlier today, and crime is still going on across Ireland. It seems that the vulnerable are being preyed on, whether it's the elderly, people coming around with scamming, whether like there's a huge seizure at Bluebell, Garda cars getting rammed in Finglas. Like, it's incredible that this stuff is or is it, as far as you're concerned, opportunity is there? Of course this is going to happen, and like you're just going to have those people in society that are looking to profit even at the worst possible time.
Yeah, look, I think always, no matter what, I suppose our clients really sometimes will always try to take advantage of certain situations, and unfortunately, I think the reason why a lot of this stuff is probably getting a little bit more headlines is because of the COVID-19, and because people are being asked to stay to isolate and stay indoors, and comply with all the regulations. So unfortunately, we're hearing about this stuff a little bit more, but sometimes this is just everyday life in certain areas of Ireland, unfortunately. And it's just because there's maybe other things going on in the world. But I think because of the COVID-19 now, a lot of this stuff is probably coming to the fore a little bit more. And I think maybe people out there don't realise that this stuff is going on the whole time. So some of it is just, it's normal day-to-day occurrences for emergency services, the Morden and Garda Síochána. But yeah, definitely, I think you'll always find that there's all sorts of scams, and sadly there are people out there who will possibly look to take advantage of that. So more than ever, I think that's where we're probably trying to angle towards engaging communities that little bit more, because to be fair, I think the majority of them have circled the wagons, and they're very good, and they're working together on that. And I think people have probably become a little bit more neighbourly on the back of this, and that we're watching out for each other a little bit more. So hopefully, look, people will be able to prevent things like that. And I think there's definitely an element of just being a little bit aware to that too, because there's all sorts of scams will try to be pulled. They're going on the whole time. But I suppose more than ever, when people are stressed out over, maybe the COVID-19 situation, they might find themselves being a little bit more vulnerable.
And I suppose obviously this is your main priority, not to mention your family at the moment. How much have you been able to focus on Laois? Because of course you can't meet up collectively.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's this has brought everything to a halt. And look, there's obviously a very serious side to that, and it obviously takes the priority. It obviously has to be number one. The sport, while it's a very important thing and it's threaded through all of our daily lives, maybe in terms of planning and what's coming down the line, it's just gone onto the back burner at the moment. And even initially when this story broke, you're kind of going, yeah, well, should we just break into small pods? And you're kind of going, no, you just cannot do that. So more than ever, the responsibility is over to the players. I think it's good to hear from the lads. We check in with them every so often, but they're finding ways to keep at it. They're finding ways to keep their fitness. I think it's very difficult to plan out what you're doing in terms of all the other intercounty managers across hurling football and camogie and ladies football. You do generally plan out the coming months. You have your training schedule in place, and this has just literally torn it all up. And look, it's not the number one thing. But yeah, as you mentioned there, it does tear up what you were planning to do. So you just have to play the waiting game, really. And I think sometimes that's just about maintenance for me with the guys with fitness. Maybe there's opportunities to clear up little bits of injuries. There's opportunities maybe to just work on aspects of your game that you mightn't ordinarily get. So you just have to look at it as an opportunity as opposed to a problem, and do your best in that time, and just be ready. I think to use that line, to stay ready. I think because I know the GA have possibly put a contingency plan B in place, all going well, and it's geared towards the end of June maybe, and we just have to wait and see. But obviously enough, the most important thing is you're hoping that the players are keeping healthy and well.
And there's talk of like a 2-week run-in before any games would take place. But in terms of the structure of the championship, like you were gearing yourself up for a minimum of 4 games, which would be great for the development of the Laois team this year back in Leinster. Would you be okay with the idea of a straight knockout, or do you think they should try and find some other way?
Yeah, it's hard to know. I think there's definitely pluses and minuses. I think there's no doubt about it. We were really, really looking forward to the championship. We were really looking forward to 2 home matches, 2 away matches, knowing that you can't get relegated out of Leinster. So it was a great opportunity for lads to get good championship matches under the belt. And again, obviously, as I always say, measure yourself off the top teams and see where you are, and hopefully that you'll maybe cause a bit of harm on the way. But yeah, at the same time, straight knockout brings a different kind of an appeal. I think it means it possibly plays into I suppose these one-off shocks as well. I think that's something that can happen, but it depends on what way the structure is. As regards having 2 weeks to prepare yourself for knockout championship, it would be far from ideal. But if that's what it has to be, that's what it has to be. I think it would bring a real excitement to it. I think we all look. I know when I was growing up, you were reared on knockout championship, and how if a team got knocked out early, well, they had 12 months to stew over that and get it right. So we'll see. There's a lad calling at me here now. Just 1 second. Sorry. So yeah, look, I think knockout championship would bring something completely different. I think it would really add to the tension of a build up. I think knowing that, look, it's in or out after this. So I think there's an element of appeal to that as well. But I think, look, it's extraordinary times, so we'll just have to run with whatever the GA decide if it comes to pass.
I have only 2 more questions, but the first one is taking on, like you secured your league status as well, which I'm sure was a great boost. But playing against Brian Cody, was there a bit of a sort of a knowing smile between you when you met in the league?
Yeah, it was. It was definitely an unusual situation. I'd have to say, I spoke with Michael Vernon earlier on the year about it and said it was something that I wasn't really looking forward to. It was going to be weird, and that day in Nolan Park was definitely unusual. It's just it's a place that's obviously quite special for me, and a place that has great memories. So going there in the National League was definitely unusual. But look, you have to get on with it. You're there to do a job. So I was kind of, I was pleased definitely that day and how things went. I felt, we accounted very well for ourselves. And again, it's more experience in the tank for the guys. But yeah, there was probably a little bit of, I suppose, a grin with him there afterwards. All right, and sure, look, that's all part of the fun. But thankfully he stayed down his end and I stayed up my end during the match.
And then just one final question. We'll finish off where we started, which is of course COVID-19. Is there any particular message that you'd just like to really kind of re-emphasize before finishing up our chat?
Yeah, sure. Look, I think we've seen a lot of the GA players, hurling football, ladies football, camogie. They hold such an influence over our youngsters, teenagers, anyone that's playing GA. They look up to them, and I've seen loads of videos online of guys trying to to preach a message, and it's just so important that it's repetitive and it's just embedded in people's psyche. And like I said there, we're only in the start of this, and I think the more that's done now, the more we'll benefit from it later on. So you're just hoping that people will continue to, practice social distancing, the clean, washing your hands regularly. And again, the GA clubs, I think in most places have mobilised and they're looking after vulnerable people in the area. So long may that last. But it's just hugely important that more than ever, maybe we concentrate on maintaining the social distancing and the washing of the hands, because like I said, the more we do of it now, maybe there'd be a bigger benefit down the line.
Thanks very much, Eddie. Appreciate your time.
No problem.